In a small town gripped by prejudice and fear, a late-night arrest of an 11-year-old boy sent shock waves through the community. Marcus Harris stood accused of breaking into a pharmacy, but behind his alleged crime lay a story that would challenge everything the townspeople thought they knew. As he was taken away, the community called for harsh punishment, but no one suspected the devastating truth about to unfold. What drove this young boy to commit these crimes, and why did he remain silent in the face of mounting accusations? The answer would stun a courtroom and force the town to confront its conscience. The crack of splintering wood shattered the midnight silence. Marcus jolted awake, his heart hammering as flashlight beams cut through the darkness of his bedroom. "Police! Don't move!" The harsh command froze him in place, his small hands trembling as they clutched his thin blanket. Heavy footsteps thundered through the house, doors thrown open one by one. "Check every room," a deep voice ordered. Marcus's first thought wasn't for himself, it was for his sister, Layla. Her bedroom was just down the hall, and he could already hear her frightened cries beginning to pierce the chaos. "Marcus?" Layla's terrified voice made him forget all about staying still. He leaped from his bed, but before he could reach his door, 2 officers burst in, flashlights blinding him. "Got him! Suspect located!" Rough hands seized his skinny arms, and Marcus struggled against their grip. "Please, my sister, I need to check on her." "Stay still, kid," one officer commanded, while his partner recited his rights in a monotone voice. Through the commotion, Marcus glimpsed his home being torn apart, officers rifling through drawers, overturning furniture, examining every corner. His mother was nowhere to be seen. Probably passed out again, he thought bitterly. "Found it!" Another officer emerged from the bathroom, holding up a plastic bag filled with medicine bottles. "Same stuff stolen from Fenton's pharmacy," he said. Marcus's shoulders slumped, and he stopped struggling. "Marcus!" Layla's cry grew closer as she appeared in the doorway, her small frame illuminated by the harsh lights. Her dark curls were a tangled mess, her favorite blue pajamas wrinkled from sleep. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to run to him, but a female officer caught her gently. "It's okay, sweetheart," the officer soothed, but Layla was inconsolable. "Don't take him! Please don't take my brother!" She reached for him with desperate hands, and Marcus felt his heart break. "It's okay, Layla," he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "Remember what I told you. Be brave for me, okay?" A social worker appeared behind Layla, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair who introduced herself as Ms. Miller. She knelt beside the crying child, speaking softly, but Layla's eyes remained fixed on her brother as the officers led him away. Outside, red and blue lights painted the neighborhood. A small crowd had gathered, drawn by the noise. Marcus recognized them all, people he had grown up around, who had watched him playing in these streets. Mrs. Sanchez, from next door, stood on her porch in her bathrobe, shaking her head. "I knew that boy would end up like this," she muttered to her husband. "Just like his father." "Such a shame," Mr. Lang from across the street agreed. "No supervision, running wild at all hours. I've caught him in my yard 3 times this month alone." The whispers followed Marcus as the officers led him to the patrol car. He could hear snippets of conversations, each one a dagger to his heart. "Breaking into the pharmacy? Can you believe it? Always knew he was trouble. Lost cause, just like his mom." Marcus kept his head down, feeling their stares burning into him. These were the same people who had once smiled at him on his way to school, who had complimented his mother on what a polite young man he was. Now they looked at him like he was something dangerous, something to be feared. The news vans arrived before the police car even left the neighborhood. Reporters thrust microphones toward the officers, cameras rolling as they captured the image of an 11-year-old boy in handcuffs being placed in the back of a patrol car. "Sources say this is the same juvenile responsible for a recent string of break-ins," one reporter announced. The suspect, whose name is being withheld, is believed to be behind multiple incidents of theft and vandalism. Back in the house, Layla's screams had turned to heartbreaking sobs as Ms. Miller tried to comfort her. "I want Marcus! Please, I need my brother!" "Sweetheart, you need to eat something," Ms. Miller urged, holding out a granola bar from her bag. "Not hungry," Layla whimpered. "Want Marcus." Ms. Miller exchanged a worried glance with her colleague. They had seen many cases of siblings being separated, but something about this one felt different. The way the little girl clung to her brother's name, the desperate look in Marcus's eyes when they took him away. There was more to this story. The next morning, the local news ran the story as the leading headline, "Juvenile Delinquent Caught in Pharmacy Break-In." The segment showed security footage from Fenton's pharmacy, a grainy video of a small figure breaking in through a back window. It cut to interviews with business owners, each one more outraged than the last. "This isn't just about one break-in," declared Mr. Fenton, the pharmacy owner. "This boy has been causing trouble for months. Where does it end?" In the juvenile detention center, Marcus sat in a stark holding cell, his small frame nearly swallowed by the oversized jumpsuit they had given him. His public defender, Mr. Grant, sat across from him, frustration evident in his tired eyes. "Marcus, I need you to work with me here," Mr. Grant pleaded. "They're pushing for a swift trial. The judge isn't known for leniency with repeat offenders." Marcus stared at the floor, fingers tracing the edges of a crumpled drawing Lila had made for him. It showed the two of them holding hands, under a bright sun, with the words "Best Brother Ever" in blue crayon. "The evidence is strong," Mr. Grant continued. "The footage, the stolen medicine found at your house, your previous incidents. If you don't speak up, I can't help you." But Marcus remained silent, his eyes fixed on Layla's drawing. A single tear dropped onto the paper, making the crayon blur. The trial date came quickly. The juvenile courtroom felt impossibly large to Marcus. He sat at the defendant's table, feet barely touching the floor. The district attorney, Miss Chen, rose from her seat, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Your Honor, members of the jury," she began, her voice clear and commanding. "The case before you may seem unusual, given the defendant's age, but the gravity of these crimes demands our attention." Miss Chen directed a laser pointer to a screen where images began to appear. Security footage from the pharmacy, vandalized school walls, stolen bread. Each incident was documented, painting a picture of a young offender spiraling out of control. But Marcus stayed silent, his eyes downcast. No one knew the truth behind each of those crimes. The hunger that drove him to steal bread, the sickness that made him break into the pharmacy for medicine, the desperation that made him act when no one else would. During a recess, Ms. Miller approached Mr. Grant. She'd been observing Marcus closely, and something didn't add up. "The timing of these incidents, the items stolen, it's all too specific," she said. "It's like he wasn't stealing for himself, but for someone else." Mr. Grant sighed. "I've tried. He won't talk to me." "Maybe he needs to know someone actually cares," Ms. Miller replied. When the trial resumed, Miss Miller was allowed to speak. She described the conditions she found at the Harris home, the empty cupboards, the broken heater, the mother lost in addiction. She described Layla's condition, how malnourished she had been, how she cried for her brother. The courtroom fell silent as the reality of Marcus's life became clear. He hadn't stolen out of malice or rebellion. He had stolen out of necessity. To feed his sister, to keep her warm, to save her when no one else would. Miss Chen shifted uncomfortably, her narrative of a troubled youth unraveling before her. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his expression softened. "Marcus, is there anything you want to say?" For the first time, Marcus looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to help my sister. She was hungry. She was sick. I didn't know what else to do." The room was still as the weight of his words settled over everyone. Mrs. Sanchez, sitting in the gallery, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Mr. Burr, Fenton looked down, shamefaced. Judge Thompson took a deep breath. "This court has heard enough," he said. "Marcus Harris, your actions were wrong in the eyes of the law, but your intentions were driven by love and desperation. This community failed you and your sister, and for that, we all bear responsibility." He paused, looking at the townspeople gathered in the gallery. "We pride ourselves on being a community, but we turned away when these children needed us most. It's time we make this right." He turned back to Marcus. "You will not be sent to a juvenile facility. Instead, you will be placed in community care. You'll receive counseling, and we will ensure that you and Layla are provided for. You deserve a chance to be a child again." Tears filled Marcus's eyes as he nodded. He glanced at Ms. Miller, who smiled at him reassuringly. One by one, the townspeople stood. Mrs. Sanchez spoke first. Your Honor, I'd like to help. I have extra blankets, food, whatever they need. Mr. Lang stood next. I can help fix their house. Make sure they have heat. Mr. Fenton cleared his throat. I'd like to set up a fund at my pharmacy for families who can't afford medicine. No child should have to break in to get what they need. Judge Thompson nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Thank you. Let's ensure no child in this town has to go through what Marcus did. As Marcus was led out of the courtroom, he caught sight of Layla waiting for him, her eyes wide with hope. She broke free from Ms. Miller and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. Marcus, are you coming home? He knelt down, hugging her tightly. Yeah, Layla, I'm coming home, and things are going to be different now, I promise. The sun shone brightly outside the courthouse, and for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. The community that had once turned away was now rallying around him and his sister, and he knew he no longer had to carry the weight alone.